So conspiracies exist. And I think when you put them together like Jefferson did in the Declaration of Independence, or he does in this book, then it becomes very obvious what the design is. And that is to concentrate power into a certain power elite and for things that they want. Now, the main reason I like the book, though, is about 9/11. And he has a witness that he has talked to, and he has the statement of this witness. His name is Scott Forbes. He now is working in the UK, but he was working for a financial institution on the 97th floor of the South Tower. And he says that they will put on notice in his financial office that there's going to be a cable update. We're going to put in new cables all the way through the South Tower. And he understood they were doing it in the North Tower, too. And so they went through these things of, we're going to ask everybody to be evacuated on a certain time. And they cut off all the power and all the security for 36 hours. That meant, I've always wondered about this thing about the bombs being in there. You know, how would anybody have the ability to put bombs in those towers with all the security they've got? And here is the key, is that they were evacuated and all the security cameras cut off and all the electricity cut off so they could allegedly put in cables. And he says that while he was doing that, he heard all these kind of strange noises in the floor above him, and he knew it was a locked space and nobody in there, and all kind of heavy machinery sounded like moving around. So anyway, he worked all weekend before 9/11, and so he was off on the day of the bombing, so he lived through it. But 98 of his people in his company died in it. But he talked to those, the families of those people, and they got emails, I mean not emails, but calls on their cell phones to the parents and wives and so forth, that there were all kind of explosions going off. That after the planes hit, you could hear these explosions constantly going off in the building. And then, of course, it collapsed, as we've all seen, you know, straight down, like we destroy buildings intentionally with bombs. So he now is living in the UK, and he has written to and called and tried to get 9/11 commission to give testimony, and they won't do it. And this, to me, solves the question I've always had. Well, they had no access to put bombs in there, but here it is. And he says they're now denying that there ever was a power cutoff or that cables were put in. So they're trying to dismiss all that, even though he knows that that's what he did. They were trying to save the information on their computers when the power went off, so it would be there when they cut the power back on. So the whole building, in fact, was shut down, so people could put the bombs in there. But he's got a long statement from him, so this is not somebody that he doesn't know. He's got it in here, and all the facts about how they could have put bombs in there. And I think that's an important piece of testimony, and part of the cover-up is that they are now saying, no, we didn't cut the power off.
I've always thought it was interesting. It used to be a staple of local news whenever a local building was blown up and went down into its own footprint, because it was so interesting to see.
Yeah.
That's never shown anymore. That's never shown. So I think it's politically incorrect to show it because, of course, it looks just like the towers. You're not supposed to remember that.
I mean, it's like telling you that 2 and 2 is 5. I mean, I know what I see. I count 2 and 2 is 4. And I see these buildings collapsing down.
And, of course, there's never been a fire that knocked down a building like that.
No.
In world history.
And of course, the statement that the experts say is that you have to have such terrific heat to melt, and that never would have gotten that hot. But they say that what happens, all this fuel dripped down and caused all this. But the fallacy there is, what about Building 7? It wasn't hit by any plane. It's right over next to them, and it collapses just like the towers. So my theory on Building 7, and I think that's sort of a key to the whole 9/11, is that I do not believe that the pilots of those planes flew the planes into the buildings. If they were held at gunpoint and told to fly into it, you know, they know they're going to be killed one way or the other, so why fly into it? Why not go into the ocean and be shot in the head? And I do not believe that those guys that say were flying the planes, the hijackers, could fly a plane. I took flying lessons back in the 60s and learned how to fly a Cessna 182 is what they said they did. And I've flown into the Atlanta airport and taken off and gotten in line with all the jets, and they've quit letting the little planes come in. It may be because I came in there. But anyway, I can swear to you that learning how to fly a 182 Cessna in no way qualifies you to fly a commercial jet. My brother was a P-51 pilot in World War II, and immediately after the war he went with Pan American and stayed with them till his retirement. He flew every plane that they had. And he trained a lot of pilots. And one time we were both in Los Angeles, and one of his regular routes was Los Angeles to London and then to Seattle and back to London and so forth. So he was taking off the next morning in a 747. So he said, would you like to go up in the cockpit and take a look? And, you know, the massive amount of instruments are there. And he talked about all the training they'd have to do and the training that he gave others to fly a plane like that. Any other commercial jet. It's just impossible for those guys to have learned enough that they could do that precision flying. So here's my theory. I think that Building 7 contained the remote controls for those planes. I think that that's the way they took over control, and that's the reason that Building 7 had to be destroyed too, because it had the evidence for the remote control. And that's just a theory, but it's based on the fallacious conclusion that those guys knew how to fly commercial jets, those hijackers. I mean, they just don't think they could. So he touches a lot on 9/11, and to me, 9/11 is the Pearl Harbor of our day. I think it was an inside job done by cooperation, probably of the CIA and the military, and it was to get us into the never-ending war of terrorism. We would never have the Patriot Act or the Home Security, that the president killed people by meeting on Tuesday and making a list. All of that is a result of 9/11, and it panicked the people. Here we are attacked on our own soil, 3,000 people killed. I mean, we need to go to war. And there's no end to the war on terror. And you would never have a Patriot Act passed during peacetime or a kill list for the president or Homeland Security. It's all a massive stealing of your security and of your freedom in order to have security. And so I think 9/11 is something we need to stay on top of and put the pressure on, like we did with the Kennedy assassination. People just kept demanding until they created commissions to get the evidence. So I think it's an important issue to keep alive and put the pressure on the politicians.
You know, John, I wish he were still here and I could talk to him, but the late Kent Snyder, who was Ron Paul's 2008 campaign manager, had picked me up once to go to Ron's office at National Airport. We're driving past the Pentagon, and he said, my uncle is a senior pilot for British Airways. And he said, there's no way that any amateur pilot could have flown. They said it would have required, and he said it would be difficult for him to fly the plane the way it had to go up and down at the speed it went to hit the Pentagon. That it was it was just a fantasy, just science fiction. The idea that these guys who trained in a Cessna could have flown this plane that way. He said even the most experienced pilot would find it very, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so impossible to me for them to believe that we believe it. I mean, sure, it's just...
Although more and more people don't believe it, right? And more and more people never believed it.
I think, though, that people see what they do not realize is blowback. They see terrorist attacks, they think, and so that must have been true, that 9/11 was a terrorist attack. And just looking back, the skeptics just say to me, well, there would never be a plan by the American, the CIA or the military, or anybody else, to kill American citizens.
Yeah.
And so you got the example of Pearl Harbor, and we now know that the plan was to let about 3,000 sailors be killed so we could get into the war with Japan. It was a planned thing, as we know now from the release of the military code being broken and the book by Stennett, that it was just a planned deal. And there's an interesting one-on-one meeting with President Roosevelt that I have in Century of War as an appendix. And there was a congressional hearing back when Bill Clinton was president on the Pearl Harbor matter. And the families of Admiral Kimmel and General Short were trying to get their names cleared, and they were reduced in rank and dismissed by Roosevelt. So Congress passed a resolution recognizing that the people in Washington had sufficient notice of the attack. If they had given adequate notice to the people in Pearl Harbor, it would have been prevented. Mm-hmm. So they made a finding, congressional finding, that there was no bad conduct on the part of Kimmel or Short, and restored their ranks and cleared them of any wrongdoing. But Bill Clinton refused to sign it. So, but while that was going on, Bill Clinton got a letter from a lady, and she said that her father was, and this was published in the Naval News, and I've got the whole thing in my book, Century of War as an appendix. It says her father was head of the War Division of the Red Cross for America. And he was called to the White House by President Roosevelt, and one-on-one, and he told him, he said, look, my intelligence people tell me there's going to be an attack on Pearl Harbor very soon. And I need for you to send supplies and personnel to the West Coast, and we will transport them to Pearl Harbor. And her father, who had lived to be 98, but told her about this in 1970, he said he's worried his whole life about the morality of that. And he told the president, he said, look, can't you do something to warn these people so they won't be killed? And Roosevelt told him, says, no, we could never get into the war unless Americans are killed on American soil. And
wow.
That letter, his letter is in there, and it's just a deliberate, premeditated murder. And yes, they can plan to kill Americans. There's also something that I was not aware of about killing Americans on American soil, and it's called Operation Northwoods. Mm-hmm. You can Google this now. This was a top secret document that was created by the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
There's actually a great Wikipedia article on Operation Northwoods.
Yeah, I've got that with me here, and you can look it up, Wikipedia. I did that, and the story of Operation Northwoods is that while Eisenhower was president, he encouraged the Joint Chiefs of Staff to come up with some plan where they could invade Cuba. And Eisenhower left before they completed their plans. But when Kennedy came in, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and you can read all this, it was a top secret document, and it was released because of the Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board. It was released publicly in November of 1997, but you don't hear much about it.
No.
But here's the plan. They were going to disguise some jet planes as Cuban aircraft. They were going to have them attack in America and kill American citizens and military personnel. And that would be a reason to have an invasion of Cuba.
And knock down a civilian jetliner. Right, they were going to blow up an American civilian jetliner and kill everybody on board.
That's right. That's in the report too. I mean, the whole thing is, and they presented this to McNamara, and he turned it down. And so Kennedy ends up, he fires the chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff named General Lemitzer.
Yes, Lyman Lemitzer.
And but he transferred him to NATO rather than make it look like it's some promotion. He can go kill civilians in Europe now.